This explanatory note is Cain, the unrighteous lineage in the earth. Cain was a murderer, and I got a subnote for that coming up, and so set a pattern of ungodliness for his own lineage in the earth. And though he were marked for protection given him by God himself, so that nobody would slay him for what he had done to his own brother Abel, see Genesis 4:8, I believe that this mark also indicated the true presence of the devil, which I've been trying to prove in this book, and as I'm going to try to continue to prove herein, is a mark that especially donates the mind of man. What could I possibly mean by that? In order for us to understand what I am getting at, we'll have to travel the road concerning the mark of the beast, a reference from the book of Revelation, or the letter of Revelation, chapter 16, verse 2, and chapter 19, verse 20. As I'm going to actually explain in a bit of detail in an upcoming chapter in this book, in chapter 8, which is called The Great Dragon and the Beast of Revelation, the mark of the beast is not what church tradition teaches. It is really the mind of man itself. At least that's what it boils down to, spiritually speaking. However, that certainly does not mean that it does not have a natural interpretation, which it does. As, again, I'm going to be covering in a few chapters from now. But as one must understand, the natural interpretation has nothing to do with literalism in that it's visible to a person's sight, but pinpoints really to a particular time in history, and that it also, in all actuality, coincides perfectly with the spiritual interpretation. The difference being, though, that it's not, as is the historical, based on a single particular time in history, but it's seen and dealt with throughout all time with mankind, of which thoughts I promise to explain in detail in my upcoming chapter in this book. But as we're going to also see, what's more important for us to understand today is the spiritual implication of this matter, which will affect us personally. The King James translation, more than saying that the mark was or is upon foreheads, actually denotes in more references that the mark was or is in foreheads. Not only so, but that there's another mark also, the mark of the Lord, Revelation 7:3, 9:4, 14:1, and 22:4. So our subject needs to be studied out much more before we can conclude that such a mark is actually visible to people's sight. I got another subnote coming up for that statement. I cannot underestimate the importance of understanding the difference of on, upon, or in within a Bible study. In the original Greek, there's only one word used for all of those words. Again, on, upon, or in. It's a preposition. And the King James translators decided to use one of a few choices. That is, in certain places, as to being in that English translation. However, what may surprise most readers is the fact that when we encounter the word forehead, or even the plural foreheads, in the book of Revelation, or the letter of Revelation, they primarily made use, the translators did, of the preposition in, as in the forehead, more than on or upon. That is, in saying that the mark was inside the forehead. Why should that be surprising? Because there is a big difference in a mark being on the forehead as opposed to being in the forehead. For if the mark were in the forehead, that could certainly denote something entirely different than some literal, visible mark which can be seen by the populace on the outside of their head. Once again, I want to point out the allegorical nature of this extremely complicated book / letter, Revelation, and say that metaphorically, it would make much more sense to say that the mark was actually inside the forehead rather than on the forehead. Because again, when we say on, we only think of something literal and visible. But when we say in, things begin clearing up for us tremendously, since that could mean the mind of man itself. Think about it. What could be more distinctive as to being the mark of the beast if not the wicked, evil mind of man? However, this works the same way of having the mark of the Lord in or on the forehead too, because we should know that what's opposite of the mind of man is the mind of Christ. Now, I'm going to quote the official Strong's Dictionary meaning, or at least listed on the screen for you to look at, of that preposition. Then give you the scriptures that's going to be associated with it in connection with forehead or foreheads. And again, this is a preposition, comes from Strong's Greek Dictionary. It's the word epi, and basically, as you can see here, it's like on, upon, or in. And it even says at the end of it, it's being used literally or even figuratively. It gives us permission to do that. Now, all right, here's some scriptures in Revelation from the King James Version for us to consider. Let's talk about the mark of the Lord. We see it in Revelation 7:3b. Till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Again, this is the King James Version. Revelation 9:4c. Only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Revelation 14:1c. Having his Father's name written in their foreheads. Finally, Revelation 22:4b. And his name shall be in their foreheads. Now let's go on about the mark of the beast. Revelation 13:16b. To receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. Revelation 14:9b. If any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark in his forehead. And finally, Revelation 17:5a. And upon her forehead was a name written. Oh, no, actually, we got one more verse. Revelation 20:4c. Now they had received his mark upon their foreheads. Now, with references like these, we should really wonder how it became more popular to quote Revelation to say that the mark was on the foreheads. In my estimation, that's really a far stretch. However, and to minds that can only see things literally, it would make more sense to apply these things naturally to the natural only. That is, literally only. Even though, once again, and as I'm going to point out a bit more coming up in the main part of the book /letter of Revelation itself warns us of the metaphorical nature of it in the very first verse. Revelation 1:1c. He sent and signified, that is, wrapped up in metaphors, signified it, the revelation, by his angel unto his servant John.